Right, let's have a look now at a sector that is going to make a lot more millionaires and billionaires in the future in Africa. It's the telecommunications sector. And have a listen to this. Mobile broadband is the fastest growing segment in the African telecoms market. That's according to Thecla Mbongue, who is a research analyst, senior analyst actually, at Ovum. Now, I was speaking to Thecla, welcome by the way. I was speaking to the CEO of Vodacom, South Africa, the other day. And one of the statistics that came out of Vodacom's numbers was that there was a 55% increase in data usage for people holding smartphones. And I said, well, surely that can't be maintained. But when I looked at the numbers and delved into them even more, it seems to me that there's fantastic potential for many, many years in the future.
There is indeed. As we've just released the figures recently, we've seen an increase of just 10% in terms of mobile broadband usage in Africa in the year 2013, and we expect more growth to come over the next 5 years. And we are now about 100 million mobile broadband connected devices, and we expect them in the next 5 years to exceed 900 million. So you just can do the math in terms of growth. And there is a need now for data usage at in the high segment, but also in the lower segments of the communications industry, of the telecommunications users. What has been fueling the growth recently has been the high adoption rate of smartphones, and this is fueled by, as I said earlier, the need for data usage, but also the fast declining prices of devices. You mentioned the likes of Vodacom just now, but also MTN recently, which, for instance, here in South Africa, released tablets, 7-inch tablets at just less than 1,000 rand. And we also talk about smartphones, which are now at less than 500 rand as well for the entry-level.
It's developing
markets.
The whole time. These are staggering numbers, Nazipa.
Absolutely staggering numbers, but I'm tempted to maybe refer back to the conversation we had yesterday, Thecla. We were speaking to Nick Rudnick. He's the CEO of Liquid Telecom, and he was telling us that to a large extent, if we want a conducive environment for broadband delivery into the continent, we need to look at broadband infrastructure, and this largely has to be led by the private sector. Now, you're overseeing the Middle East as well as Africa. Can you give us some examples from these two regions of countries who have gotten it absolutely right, in particular around that very conducive policy environment to get that broadband development going?
It's difficult actually to give a name of country that has done right. Actually, every market is different from each other. And if I just look at Africa, for instance, in terms of broadband development, like as you said, Liquid Telecom said, there's still a lot to do in terms of a fixed infrastructure development. If we just compare the penetration rate here in Africa, we are just at 5% broadband penetration, which is the lowest rate globally if we compare all the regions of the world. South Africa, for instance, has done, well, on African standard, is one that has done better than others, but there's still a lot to do. And when you mentioned earlier that there is a need for involvement of private sector, that actually what has happened is the involvement of the private sector that enabled the growth of broadband development in the mobile segment and nowadays in the fixed segment. But we still have in South Africa and in many African countries a monopoly or a lot of fixed infrastructures being essentially owned by the incumbent government-owned operator.
Mark here in Johannesburg. Pricing dynamics come into play here, Thecla, I guess, for both hardware and software. What's the pricing situation on the ground, and will that also potentially stimulate?
On the ground, everyone, the consumers always complain that the prices are still on the high side, but it's still expensive to communicate on the continent. However, if we look at over the past 5 years, we've seen a fast decrease in terms of pricing, and the price per megabyte, for instance. But what we've seen is a segmentation in a way that operators, service providers now segment their tariffs in order to accommodate more segments or more the low end. I'll just take an example. For instance, we now have WhatsApp bundles or data bundles that just to be with the data allowance that can be used just for a day, or data, a very small denomination of data allowance. So I think that just beyond saying that the price per megabyte or the price of the data services has decreased, I would say that there's been a lot of segmentation allowing the entry-level market to use the services more often.
Final question for me, Thecla, is I hope this is going to contribute to the macroeconomic expansion of our country and of the continent. I hope these the expansion of broadband, mobile broadband, and its usage is not going to be used frivolously. It's going to actually help rural areas, I mean, in terms of financial services, banking and communication, and doing business. Do you think it's going to be used correctly?
I hope so, and I think so. It is already being used efficiently, or as you say. We tend to think that everything that is non-voice is just for leisure purpose, but just basic service, for instance, like not basic service, basic data services, the fact that you are able to communicate faster using either faster and at a cheaper price, for instance, using WhatsApp, being able to access XYZ application on your smartphones as well, because a lot of services now have a smartphone application that can be downloaded for all the consumers. I think contribute to the well-being of the consumers. What is important is the production or the development of relevant application or services that can be channeled via telecommunications or broadband network, and also collaboration with between all the key stakeholders that enable economic development in the country. So when we talk about services in rural area, there's definitely a need for operators to develop services there, but they're not charities, so it has to be profitable for them. And if it's not profitable for them, I think that's when the government should step in and help in various ways.
It's a dynamic and constantly changing environment, very exciting as well. Thecla, thanks very much for coming in this evening. That's Thecla Mbongue, who is a senior analyst at Ovum.